A boy sits on a bench, scrolling on his phone. A seemingly routine encounter with a police officer escalates when prejudice meets power. The officer singles out the boy, demands his phone, and destroys it in an act of unwarranted aggression. What the officer doesn't know is that this isn't just any boy, it's the son of the Rock. When the father arrives, the tables turn dramatically. Subscribe and like the video to see how the story unfolds. The idyllic tranquility of a perfect suburban day is painted across our screen. As the camera pans leisurely across the street, neighbors stroll with their furry friends, children pedal their bikes with youthful exuberance, and birds sing a carefree melody. In the midst of this serenity, a boy of no more than 14 years sits peacefully on a park bench. Well-mannered and neatly dressed, he appears lost in the captivating world of his phone, oblivious to the vibrant world around him. It is a picture-perfect scene of suburban bliss, until, perhaps, something unexpected is about to unfold. A formidable presence rolls into the picture as a police cruiser glides to a halt, its tires hissing against the asphalt. Officer Blake, a seasoned cop whose face bears the burden of 1,000 scowls, emerges from the vehicle. His walk, a calculated march, radiates authority. The murmur of the suburban day suddenly dips into a gloomy undercurrent, the presence of Officer Blake darkening the scene with his unwavering gaze and stern expression. As Officer Blake's penetrating gaze sweeps over the boy, his expression hardens, an ominous furrow forming between his brows. Seemingly drawn by some unseen force, he advances toward the youth, his powerful stride carrying him over the grass, casting a shadow of menace over the once innocent scene. Towering over the seated boy, the height of his imposing figure, coupled with the badge on his chest, creates an intimidating aura, making it impossible for the boy to ignore the escalating situation. Officer Blake leans in close, his lips curling into a scowl as he unleashes a scathing rebuke. "What are you doing here, kid?" he demands, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. "This is a public space, not a hangout for troublemakers. Do you even live around here?" His words are drenched in accusation, a scathing indictment aimed at the boy without any apparent provocation. The boy's response, a stark contrast to Officer Blake's antagonistic demeanor, is measured and polite. His composure betrays a maturity beyond his years. "Just waiting for my dad, sir," he says, his words tinged with a touch of nervousness. The "sir" is a testament to his respect for authority. Even in the face of intimidation, the boy remains unfazed, a cool-headed resilience that only serves to further infuriate the belligerent officer. Officer Blake's next demand, uttered with a tone of cold authority, reveals his unrelenting desire to exert control. "Let me see that phone," he barks, his hand snatching out like a cobra's strike. "Now," he adds, emphasizing the urgency of his demand, his demeanor brooking no dissent. In his mind, this seemingly harmless teenage boy is a potential suspect, a threat to be quelled through any means necessary. The boy's defiance, small yet poignant, is a testament to his dignity in the face of Officer Blake's aggression. His hesitation, a subtle yet powerful gesture, reveals a quiet courage that belies his age. "Why, sir?" he inquires, his voice taut with indignation. "I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just waiting for my dad, like I said." Despite the rising tension in the air, the boy refuses to back down, the frayed nerves in his voice hinting at the courage it takes to stand his ground. Officer Blake's impatience spills over, his voice rising to a hostile pitch that sends shivers down the spine. "Did I stutter?" he spits, the words cracking like a whip. "Hand it over." The aggression in his voice is palpable, his demeanor transforming from intimidating to outright hostile. As he advances on the boy, his clenched jaw and fists betray his barely contained fury. To Officer Blake, the boy's defiance is an affront, a challenge to his authority that must be squashed at all costs. As the boy relents, reluctantly surrendering his phone to Officer Blake's invasive scrutiny, the officer's sneering expression turns into one of contemptuous dismissal. "What kind of kid needs a phone like this?" he scoffs, his tone dripping with derision. "Bet you stole it." The accusation, levied without any evidence, lands like a gut punch, a crude attempt to dehumanize and dismiss the boy as nothing more than a common criminal. Yet the boy, despite his innocence, finds himself powerless to defend against Officer Blake's prejudiced assumptions. Incensed by the officer's baseless accusation, the boy's voice rises in pitch, his words defiant. "No, sir," he insists, his eyes blazing with indignation. "My dad got it for me. It's mine." His words, brimming with conviction, echo through the air, a testament to his unwavering determination to defend himself against Officer Blake's prejudices. Despite his protestations, the deck is stacked against him, the weight of Officer Blake's authority pressing down on him like an iron vice. The officer's sneer curls into a sadistic smirk, his eyes burning with malevolent glee as he raises the phone high above his head. In a sudden, violent motion, he brings the device crashing to the ground, the impact shattering it into a million tiny pieces that glint like broken glass on the pavement. The sound of the destruction cuts through the air, a cacophony of violence that leaves the boy's mouth agape, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. The disdain in Officer Blake's voice is palpable as he addresses the boy with a cold, emotionless stare. "There," he says, his voice brimming with contempt. "Let's see you play your games now." The arrogance in his tone is unmistakable, the viciousness of his actions, betraying a cruelty that goes beyond mere intimidation. For Officer Blake, destroying the boy's property, a cherished gift from his father, is nothing more than a power play, a demonstration of the authority he wields and the consequences that await those who dare to challenge it. As the boy takes in the wreckage of his beloved phone, his expression transforms from defiant determination to utter heartbreak. His eyes, once blazing with indignation, now shimmer with unshed tears, his lower lip quivering as he struggles to contain his emotions. The sight of the destroyed device, a precious gift from his father now reduced to rubble, seems to break something inside him, a cruel reminder of the casual brutality that exists in the world. The boy stands frozen in place, the enormity of the moment overwhelming him. The scene has attracted the attention of nearby onlookers, who have gathered like spectators at a car crash, their eyes wide with shock and horror. But as Officer Blake turns his gaze upon them, his expression, a chilling blend of malevolence and intimidation, freezes the spectators. Their mouths suddenly go dry, and their tongues are tied with fear. Their instinctive desire to intervene is suppressed by the palpable sense of danger, the fear of retribution or retaliation silencing any potential protests. The scene has become a living tableau of silence, broken only by the boy's quiet sobs. The boy's desperation is evident as he fumbles with his backpack, his hands trembling with shock and anger as he retrieves a second phone. The device, an older model with a cracked screen, is a stark contrast to the expensive phone Officer Blake destroyed. With shaking fingers, the boy dials a number, his voice trembling as he states, "I'm calling my dad." The act of reaching out to a higher authority, even as the threat of Officer Blake looms over him, is a testament to the boy's resilience and determination to see justice served. Officer Blake's twisted amusement at the boy's desperate plea for assistance is clear in the mocking smirk that curls his lips. "Go ahead, kid," he chuckles, his voice dripping with condescension. "What's your dad going to do, huh? Sue?" The derision in his tone is palpable, as if the idea of being held accountable for his actions were nothing more than a joke to him. Just as Officer Blake's bravado threatens to reach its apex, the air is suddenly rent by the throaty growl of a powerful engine. A sleek black SUV slides into view, its doors swinging open like the gates of justice. The crowd falls silent in anticipation. Out steps Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, his imposing figure casting a shadow over the scene as he surveys the damage with a cold fury. The transformation from devastated father to a force of reckoning is complete as he locks eyes with Officer Blake, his expression radiating a chilling intensity. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson approaches Officer Blake with a deliberate stride, his every movement exuding a lethal calm that commands the attention of everyone present. Stopping mere inches away from the increasingly uncomfortable officer, his towering frame casts a figurative shadow over his adversary. "What happened here?" The Rock's question is deceptively simple, but the sharpness in his tone reveals an underlying fury that could erupt at any moment. His eyes, cold and hard as diamonds, are fixed on Officer Blake, daring him to justify his reprehensible behavior. Officer Blake, once confident in his ability to intimidate and coerce, is visibly unsettled by the Rock's overwhelming presence. His words, which were meant to convey an air of superiority, falter slightly as he comes face to face with the sheer force of his adversary. Just teaching your kid some respect, he begins, his bravado now tinged with uncertainty. He had a phone he couldn't possibly afford, so, his explanation trails off, the justification ringing hollow in the face of the Rock's unwavering gaze. The Rock's patience, already tenuous, snaps like a brittle branch. His interruption is punctuated by a tone of blistering rage. "You what?" he growls, each syllable a verbal battering ram that crashes into Officer Blake's fragile facade. "Decided to destroy it?" The Rock's anger is now palpable, his eyes narrowing into slits of molten fury as he leans in closer. The pressure of his proximity is like a physical force bearing down upon Officer Blake. Officer Blake, his composure wavering in the face of the Rock's scathing scrutiny, straightens his posture in a desperate attempt to salvage his dignity. "I was doing my job," he asserts, his voice strained as he attempts to justify his actions. Kids like him, his words trail off, his reasoning lost in the maelstrom of his growing fear and shame. The Rock's voice rises like a tempest, the raging anger within him finally unleashed as he punctuates each word with a booming intensity. "Kids like him," he roars, his muscular frame tensing with barely restrained fury. "You mean respectful, polite kids who mind their own business? Or do you mean kids with skin like his?" The Rock's accusation, searing with righteous indignation, cuts through Officer Blake's fragile facade like a hot knife through butter. The stark realization of the officer's racial bias dawns upon the crowd, a palpable shock rippling through the air. Officer Blake, scrambling to extricate himself from the verbal tar pit he's sinking in, fumbles for a rebuttal, his words tripping over themselves as he attempts to reverse the narrative. But the Rock, sensing his desperation, takes a decisive step forward, his powerful frame now crowding into Officer Blake's personal space, forcing him to backpedal in both word and deed. The crowd, awed by the sheer presence of the Rock, falls silent, their collective attention fixed on the unfolding drama. The Rock turns his attention to his son, his tone softening slightly as he addresses the boy. His voice resonates with paternal concern. "You okay, buddy?" he asks, his eyes now full of tenderness as he takes in his son's fragile state. The boy nods, his lips tight with a barely suppressed tremor, his face a study in shock and confusion. The brief exchange, a momentary pause in the rising tension, is a touching reminder of the bond between father and son, a bond that transcends all else. The Rock's gaze returns to Officer Blake, his voice now razor-sharp with a lethal promise. "You think you can bully kids and get away with it," he growls, the words vibrating with barely contained fury. "Let me show you what happens when you mess with the wrong family." The threat, delivered with the icy precision of a seasoned warrior, is the crescendo of a confrontation that has been simmering since Officer Blake first laid eyes on the young boy. With a slow, deliberate movement that belies the rage simmering within him, the Rock reaches down and picks up a shard of the boy's destroyed phone, holding it up like a trophy of Officer Blake's shame. He extends it towards the officer with a knowing smirk. "You're going to pay for this," he states, the promise of retribution woven into his every syllable. "Literally. You're replacing that phone." The Rock's demand, delivered with the authority of a king holding court, carries with it an unspoken threat, the promise of consequences that Officer Blake will not soon forget. Officer Blake, refusing to submit in the face of the Rock's demands, responds with brazen defiance that borders on foolishness. "You think I care about some overpriced toy?" he sneers, his condescension masking a growing fear. His arrogance, once a shield against the scorn of the public, now hangs around his neck like an albatross, the weight of his mistakes and the threat of his impending downfall bearing down upon him. The Rock, his patience at its limit, closes the distance between himself and Officer Blake. His sheer mass creates a hulking, menacing presence. His voice, now a gravelly snarl that seems to roll up from the depths of his formidable chest, cuts through the air with a steely warning. "You're going to care," he hisses, the words dripping with menace. "When you're on the front page of every newspaper tomorrow, your little display of bigotry will be national news, and your life will be ruined." As the confrontation intensifies, the gathering crowd becomes a sea of cell phones, capturing the historic moment when the Rock held Officer Blake accountable for his actions. With a swift movement, the Rock retrieves his own phone, his thumb flying across the screen as he dials a number. Moments later, another police cruiser screeches to a halt, its siren silent but its presence foreboding. From within, Captain Rodriguez, Officer Blake's superior, emerges, his dark eyes flitting between the rock and his subordinate. The air thickens with anticipation, the crowd drawing closer as they await the outcome of this fateful confrontation. Captain Rodriguez steps forward, his tone a mixture of confusion and authority. "What's going on here?" he demands, his eyes settling upon Officer Blake with a severity that suggests an imminent reckoning. The Rock, his resolve unwavering, addresses the captain directly. "This man attacked my son and destroyed his property, all because he didn't like the color of his skin," he explains, his voice firm and clear as he lays out the facts of the situation. Captain Rodriguez's expression hardens at this revelation, the seriousness of the allegations beginning to dawn upon him. The Rock, wasting no time in relaying the appalling sequence of events, gestures towards the remnants of the phone scattered on the ground. "Here is the evidence of Blake's brutality," he declares, his voice unwavering in its determination. "He saw my son sitting quietly on this bench and, in a fit of racism, assaulted him and destroyed his property." The Rock's words carry a gravitas that commands respect, his demeanor a mix of righteous anger and fatherly protectiveness that leaves no doubt as to his resolve. Captain Rodriguez turns his attention towards Officer Blake, his face now contorted into a mask of disappointment and disgust. "Is this true?" he demands, the question as much a rhetorical accusation as it is an inquiry. The tension in the air is palpable, a hush falling over the crowd as they await Officer Blake's response. With a meekness that betrays his earlier bravado, Blake tries to protest, but his voice falters under the weight of the Rock's piercing gaze. It wasn't like that," he protests, his eyes darting from the Rock to Captain Rodriguez and back again as if searching for a lifeline. But the damning evidence of the crowd's phone recordings has captured every moment of the incident, leaving Officer Blake with nowhere to hide. The truth, vivid and undeniable, plays out on the screens of countless devices, a testament to the officer's bigotry and brutality. Captain Rodriguez's rebuke, as sharp and decisive as a guillotine, slices through the air with the force of a hurricane. "Hand over your badge and gun," he orders, his voice reverberating with the authority of the law itself. "You're suspended, pending an investigation." The words ring out with finality, their gravity echoing through the streets as if signaling the death knell of Officer Blake's career. The disgraced officer, his face drained of all color, reluctantly complies, handing over the symbols of his power with the limp resignation of a defeated man. The Rock, satisfied by Officer Blake's suspension but still determined to mete out his own brand of justice, steps forward once more, his powerful frame casting a shadow over his nemesis. "And you're buying my son the newest phone on the market," he intones, his voice a low, dangerous growl that leaves no room for argument. "Today." The Rock's eyes glitter with a steely resolve, his words not a request but a command, a decree from the godfather of the suburbs that will be heeded, or else. As Officer Blake acquiesces, driven by a mixture of fear and resignation, the crowd erupts into raucous cheers, their fists pumping the air in celebration of the Rock's triumph. The disgraced officer, his head lowered in defeat, trudges to his car under the watchful eye of the onlookers, the weight of their collective disapproval, a silent indictment of his bigotry, but the Rock, standing tall amidst the jubilation, seems unmoved by the victory. The Rock, once the stoic defender of justice, now reverts to the role of doting father as he and his son wander the aisles of the bustling phone store. With his arm draped around the boy's shoulders, the Rock cracks a series of corny jokes, his grin transforming the former scene of confrontation into one of laughter and camaraderie. The boy, his face lit up with a smile that could illuminate the darkest corners of the store, beams with pride as his father banters with the salesperson. His worries are forgotten amidst the joyous moment. The boy, gratitude shining in his eyes, turns to his father and utters two simple words that carry a world of meaning. "Thanks, Dad," he says, his voice brimming with love and admiration. The Rock, his own expression softening, places a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. Hey, he says, the warmth in his voice like a hug in its own right. "You're my son. I'll always have your back." As the story draws to a close, the message it has woven throughout the narrative becomes clearer than ever. The Rock's actions serve as a reminder that the fight against bigotry and oppression is a battle that belongs to all of us. His refusal to back down, even in the face of overwhelming adversity, inspires hope and courage in the hearts of those who witness his stand. And as he shares a moment of fatherly pride with his son, the message, that true strength comes from standing up for what is right, resonates long after the story ends, a beacon of light in a world still too often shrouded in darkness.